All right. Hello, everyone. Hope y'all are doing well. Oh, last slide. Sorry. Okay. Hope you guys are doing good. We are continue looking at differentiation of self or defining self. Those words are actually used pretty interchangeable throughout Bowen Bowenian thinking. Woo. Um, so this was an interesting chapter to me in that I really liked how hopefully you guys have done some reading. I really like how and I'm trying to get some more light on my face. Really liked how he there was a lot of self-disclosure and how he just shared his own journey and his own story. And so I hope you're able to think about your own family and uh, some of the situations that you have experienced, because it's helpful when you're ministering to people how you can bring this kind of stuff into your sessions with them, because you've done it with you, not just read it in a book, but you've thought about it, thought through it in terms of your own family and your own differentiation. So we're thinking on a continuum. I think that's probably redundant by now. I think I've said that several times. So when we have reactivity, which is emotional expression, and we have yeah, thinking, logic, and I want you to think just in plain terms. When we get really angry, we just become very irrational. And in other words, we are emotionally reactive. There's this we say things we shouldn't say. We say things we wish we hadn't have said. We say things that we don't mean. Maybe we mean them, but not quite like that. Um, and so I guess you would say, okay, so how, if we were to ask the question, how do you know if someone is differentiated? It is the ability to remain calm and to think in the midst of family conflict. And so, and for some of you, me too, I'm like, ooh, like, so, some people just by nature are much more emotional than other people. I hope y'all are chuckling because I'm a pretty emotional guy. And I get pretty riled up at times. So I'm like, okay, so that ability to remain calm and think, and also I really like the theme of anxiety, because when I'm anxious, it's like my brain just locks up. I can't think at all. So if there's an element of anxiety in the midst of that conflict, then I'm definitely emotionally reactive. The higher the anxiety, the more emotionally reactive I am, as opposed to being able to think clearly and remain calm. So that's kind of a measure. It's kind of a, when you talk about the fruits of the fruit bearers in the Christian world, we talk about, we can't judge one another, but we can see from the fruit of others as to whether or not they're living for the Lord, or doing this or doing that. Right? Yeah, with me, hopefully. Okay. So this is a good measure, if you will, something that you can look at in your own life and in others' lives to kind of evaluate where you're at on that continuum of differentiation of self versus not being very differentiated. Fused, I believe, would be the word on the other end of that continuum. We're going to talk about that in a minute, a little bit more at the end of the slide. This is going to be short slides because most of it was just his story, but I tried to pull out information as we went along. So our ability to control, and I think from a Christian perspective, fruits of the Holy Spirit, self-control, right? Our ability to control our emotional reactivity is a huge element, goal in terms of being healthy in families. The higher of an ability we have to control our emotion, this either enables us to or not define ourselves or differentiate. Um, not only in our family, but also in our work world and beyond. He also says that this is something that it's kind of like growing spiritually, and we're never done, right? It's not like, oh, I get to this point and I'm there, I have arrived, and yeah, no, only Jesus was perfect. It is a lifelong process, and it is never complete. And I think that's important because I think there's an element of humility there. I think there's an element of willingness to continue to strive to grow and work on ourselves, which I think is certainly a value in the field of counseling, and something that's really, I think, good and healthy and important to be able to recognize that. Never think you've arrived. Never think you're there with any issue of your life, because there will always be more growth needed in a particular area. You may have huge breakthroughs. You may have high times. You may have massive amounts of progress. And I like this: progress, stuckness, and even regression, right? So there's times we're just stuck. We feel like we're just stuck in the mud and just not going anywhere. There's times we go backwards, man, and we go back to like, man, I am in junior high having a little adolescent meltdown right here, right now, and I am 54 years old. Wow, what the heck, right? I mean, that's so we regress from time to time. But if we were to draw this, if we were to chart this on one of the things I do with my clients is I get on a huge whiteboard, and I draw this line. I hope this works out at an angle like this. So it's, if y'all can picture this, right? So you have periods of but overall, right? You're going up. You're growing, right? You're getting better overall. That's the hope. That's the idea. So he talked about several different things and aspects in the family. I wanted to talk a little bit about the death and how we deal with death. Symbolism is so important to us as Christians. It is so important to, I believe, us as human beings, really. And so he talked about how his family, there were family members that didn't even go to the funeral for the grandfather that killed himself. I believe it was his grandfather killed himself. They said things like, "Oh yeah, he had a heart attack." I'm thinking, did they believe that, or did they just say that? Because he wasn't real clear on that, but they just didn't acknowledge reality. It's like, wow, crazy. Rituals are important. They're good for us. Sometimes it's funny to hear people talk about, oh, well, all that going to the graveside and visiting, that's ridiculous and that's not necessary. Whoa, time out. That's a very powerful and a very beautiful thing for people. It's not been a big part of my ritual when in dealing with loved ones that have died, but I get it. It's just because it's not something I do don't look at other people and be like, oh, well, that's ridiculous. Talking about it too much, not talking about it enough, all these things. And again, there's balance. Obviously, we can become, we can get to where it becomes all consuming, and we are talking about someone's death and their passing and talking about them too much. I'm sure that's a possibility. Again, think in terms of a continuum. We're on either end of the continuum, and we're talking about it too much, or we're not talking about it enough. Obviously, not talking about it at all is problematic. Rituals help us acknowledge death, accept it. Without. Bullet number 3 there. That's really good, Brad. I don't think spell check picked up on that one. Without isolation, right? So we want to be able to have some private moments. I think there's grieving that happens that's just between me, myself, and I and God, which just alone. But there's also things where we come together as family and as community and grieve together. There's got to be flexibility. He talked about being less emotionally reactive. And I think, well, people tend to get pretty emotional during funerals, and I don't think he's saying don't do that at all. But there is this impulsiveness and out of controlness that can get really extreme and be problematic. Really encourage you to look at page 134, where he lays out his family genogram, and think about that in terms of your own family. I think if I do this class again, I may have people. Actually, I'm sorry, you are doing a genogram. Good. Of your family, but I want you to do the genogram, and use some of his examples. Make it yours, right? Your family, but understand the processes and some of the terminology that he's using as you do that. Okay, so fusion, which another word in Bowen, I don't think uses the word enmeshed. I don't think he would have a problem with that word. It's just not his word. But in the broader umbrella of systems theory in general, right? Other people use enmeshed. I actually like that term a lot. Fusion works though. If you're fused together, you're too tightly connected, and but we're just really close. And yeah, but it's like you can't think without the other person. You can't function without the other person. You can't make a decision without talking to the other person. So there's a loss of self there, or an absence of differentiation when it comes to that. And then the other end of the extreme, again, this is a continuum, is cut off. And then this was interesting, and he, in chapter 6, he talked about some of the cutoffs in his family, and then even secondary cutoffs, and how he went back and worked to reestablish some of those relationships. And he talked about, I just inherited this cutoff, right? So, like, he had an aunt and a cousin maybe that was extended family, second cousin. And he's like, there was no bad blood between us. We didn't have a conflict. We didn't have a falling out. Our parents did. And there was this cutoff. And he found some delightful relationships, and learned a ton about his family through these people that he reached out to. I think in my family, I think back to my dad tells a story. So my dad's 90. My grandfather passed away when I was probably 10 or 11. So my grandfather's, one of my grandfather's brothers, somebody died. There were three brothers, and one of the brothers, the man of the house died. I guess it was one of his brothers died. And the other brothers came together and said, we will help support the wife until she gets remarried, or if she gets remarried, X amount of dollars per month. And they all agreed on it. And the one brother came back and said, yeah, I can't participate. I think his wife got upset about it and was like, no, we can't spend that money on that. And he didn't participate in it. And my grandfather cut him off 100%. Never spoke to him again. Probably went to his grave angry and bitter, and with a broken relationship, which really breaks my heart. It's just super sad. So as a result of that, I have inherited a secondary cutoff, in that I don't know anybody from that. I guess that would be great Uncle Bill for me. I think his name was Bill. So those are the kinds of things we're talking about, and the kinds of things I want you to do with your own family as you look at stories in this chapter. And then we've got we've got sections on defining yourself in a profession, your social life, church, etc., wherever. And keep in mind and understand and realize, when it comes to people's patterns, the very exact same pattern, it'll look a little different, but the pattern that you show in your family is the same kind of pattern that you're going to show with your in your other social settings, including your profession. And you may think of your bosses like mom or dad, and you may find yourself reacting to them in those similar ways, whether that be trying to fuse with them too much, or being too distant and cut off from them. and then your coworkers as siblings. And it may sound strange to some of you, and it's not necessarily exactly like that. And different situations are, the uniqueness possibilities is huge. I get that, but it's an interesting way to think. Okay, so I hope you guys are enjoying. Hope this works for you. And it's a short one, but there wasn't a whole lot of meat. It was mostly just stories, but that's good because I want you to use that kind of lingo as you write your paper and do your own genogram. All right, goodbye. God bless. Y'all have a good rest of the day or night, whatever it is for you.